is Skylar Moore. This segment is on the guilds and their impact on the film industry. What are the guilds? The guilds are the Screen Actors Guild, the WGA, which is the Writers Guild, the DGA, which is the Directors Guild, and IATSE, which represents generally the below-the-line crew. The guilds represent employees in dealing with film companies, and there's kind of a couple of things to keep in mind on that general rule. One is that so many people in the film industry operate through loan-out corporations, which are not employees at least for tax purposes, but the guilds take the position that their jurisdiction extends to loan-out corporations. Another thing is, who is subject to the guild agreement? And the answer is that whatever company signs the guild agreement and its subsidiaries are subject to the guild agreement, but parent companies and parent company sister companies are not subject to the guild agreement. The moral of the story is, if you're signing with the guilds, you want to sign with a subsidiary, not with your parent company, because if you've signed with your parent, you're going to bind all affiliates going forward. You always want to sign at a lower level so that the guild agreements only apply to those companies. What is the impact of signing with the guild agreement? It basically provides for mutual exclusivity. That is, the guild members must only work for companies that have signed the guild agreements, and the signatories to the guild agreements, the film companies that have signed, can only hire the guild members. So it creates this mutual exclusivity. It effectively gives the guilds a monopoly, and there's a legal exception that recognizes that it effectively is a monopoly and permits it. What is the impact on film companies? There's two significant impacts on film companies. The first one is that all the guild agreements set minimum prices on what you can pay their members and minimum working conditions. This can be a substantial cost. I have had a client find that it was cheaper to build Los Angeles in Hungary than it was to shoot Los Angeles in Los Angeles. And it was because of the guild requirements that impose these minimum payments and working conditions for everybody. And that's a sad statement on the industry in general. The second thing that the guild agreements do is that they require the payment of residuals. And that's really the worst, most significant negative impact on the film industry. Residuals are payments based on gross receipts, not net profits. It is unique to the film industry. No other union in the entire country gets a percentage of gross receipts of the companies that they're working for, but for some reason that's the way it works in Hollywood. So film companies, in an industry where most films lose money, find themselves having to pay a significant portion of gross receipts, and on average it's as much as 10% by the time you're done with it, of gross receipts goes to the guilds off the top. And that's an expensive proposition for a film company that hasn't yet recouped their cost in the film. The way it works for a theatrical film is that the residuals are not imposed on theatrical revenue. They are only imposed on home video revenue, video on demand, and television revenue. And with respect to video revenue, the general rule is that only 20% of video gross receipts are included for purposes of calculating residuals. So if the film company has, for example, $100 of video gross receipts, $20 of that goes into the bucket for purposes of calculating residuals. And theatrical revenue is out altogether. For independent film companies, the biggest problem with the guild agreements is that they really are not designed for the independent film companies. They're negotiated between the studios and the guilds, and independent film companies are an afterthought. And it almost seems, when the guilds come to dealing with independent film companies, that their goal is to put them out of business, because they impose so many requirements on independent film companies that they do not impose on studios, that it makes independent film making extraordinarily difficult. And here's just some of the things that the guilds do. One is they often require a deposit for residuals, so that during production the film company has to pay to the guilds a significant amount of money as security for their obligation to pay residuals. That increases the budget, that increases the cost of the film. That's a painful cost to film companies that they may not have budgeted for. Second, the guilds for independent film companies want to get a security interest in the film. This is something they do not ask for from the studios, and that really messes up financing because you've got other lenders and financiers with security interest, and now you've got to go and integrate that with the guild. Guilds often want to be in first position, and that causes all kind of fights and aggravation. Next is that they want to often want to be on the collection account and be in the waterfall ahead of everybody else, getting their percentage of residuals, so that it requires negotiation with all these guilds. It can slow down the process. It's just makes it remarkably difficult. And finally, they take the position that residuals are based on the greater of pre-sale revenue that the film company gets, or at source actual revenue that is received by sub-distributors, even if the film company never receives it. And so the film companies often end up getting a bill for residuals for amounts that they never received, because the guilds impose the residuals not only on what the film companies actually get, but what on their sub-distributors get. And so that's a very painful experience for many film companies. It drastically increases the cost of making the film and of the share of profits that has to be given out. This is what causes offshore production. This is why there's so much production often outside the United States. It's often to get rid of one or more of the guilds to try to reduce the cost of the film. And in my personal opinion, that's a shame. We're driving production out of the United States.